Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mile High Sports today on Mile High Sports. I'm Sean Drotar. Now, it is Tuesday, so we get an opportunity to sit down with our friend Cody Rourke, the lead Broncos writer at Mile High Sports, the host of Locked On Broncos podcast, and, of course, the film room that we'll be talking about a little bit today as well to get yourself about bye week's coming up now. Broncos are on the bye after their big win. You're going to want to be able to look a little bit deeper into it, and Cody has a film room ready for you. But the Broncos last night do the NFL proud, at least. Not only do they get the win, but they also do it in highly entertaining fashion. The 41-32 Monday Night Football game had just about everything. Mile High Sports' Doug Otterwill has a piece up on the website right now talking about called it Mile High Magical. Felt a little bit like John Elway's days where magic just seemed to happen at Mile High. The Broncos end up having Jerry Jeudy back. He plays tremendously, has a terrific, the stat line is almost unbelievable. And you realize it could have and should have been better than that if Jameis Winston had been more accurate. But the Broncos defense, let's start there, Cody. 552 yards surrendered against the Browns, and not much of that on the ground. Obviously, You're thinking, boy, maybe somebody like Nick Chubb
60
went
yards
off
on the ground total.
Not the case. Fortunately, the defense comes up big at the right times. But when you look at this game, I'm going to start with the negative first because, look, the Broncos won. That's the important part, right? They're in good position. We'll talk about that as the show goes along. But I think there were a lot of fans that looked at it and said, ooh, playoffs or not, you can't play like that against that team. And yes, I know the Browns are playing better than the one that started 1-6. That was a bad defensive performance for the most part. And if it wasn't salvaged by 2 pick sixes, the Broncos lose this game and they're embarrassed on national television.
Yeah, I mean,
what happened?
For as bad as the Broncos defense was, it was also terrific at times when they needed it to be, you know, and I think that's just the give and take, the pull you're going to see in the NFL. And look, I just want to remind people too, I really believe every week is different, right? On paper, people look at the record. Oh, the Cleveland Browns, they're abysmal. They're at the bottom. They got 3 wins. They're 3-8. Denver should steamroll them. If you look at it based on record, you can make that assumption, but it's like, I look at Cleveland, I've been watching them too. It's like, you watch them on film, they're a tough team.
Yeah.
And, they were awful with Deshaun Watson.
Their problem was a quarterback and still is.
You have to ask a question. If Jameis Winston started for them earlier in the season, they might have a better record than they currently do. But no, it's a tough, gritty team. Obviously, their defense is very talented. They got players there. And look, Jameis Winston had, a game of his life in some aspects, and then also the full Jameis Winston experience where, hey, like you could say he threw 6 touchdowns essentially.
Right. He threw for nearly 700 yards if you counted the Broncos return yards, I suppose.
That was just one of those games. Denver just got, once again, they got caught a little bit. And there's a multitude of different factors that went into the defensive performance. Obviously, 500 yards given up, 553 to be exact. It's not good. It's not what Vance Joseph wants. It's not what Sean Payton wants, but there's context to it that we'll dive into a little bit here on today's show that, kind of maybe sheds light into what the team is going to do here. I think this was a one-off performance. I don't think this is how the Broncos defense is going to play. I know a lot of people are like, wow, if Jameis Winston is doing this, what is Joe Burrow going to do? Valid thought.
Yes.
But as we said, the NFL changes every single week. Every week, every game has a different theme to it. This one was a rough one for the defense, but as I said earlier, they were terrible for a large portion of the game. They were terrific in clutch time moments when they needed it the most. I think that's what matters. And this was a game, Sean, where I'm like, if the Broncos, like I put a tweet out there. I said, hey, Denver's trailing 32-31 here after they gave up that touchdown to Chubb in the flat. I said, hey, this is a test for this young Broncos team. We're going to see. And certainly we did. Bo Nix in the offense did a great job responding, leading a scoring drive down there. And then, hey, the defense took care of business. There's a lot to break down from this game. It was a thriller. I mean, being there in the stadium, people were telling me the broadcast on Monday Night Football sucked. There was like the announcers weren't very energetic. I could tell you inside the stadium, if you were there, it was electrifying. The stadium was shaking on third down. It was, it was every emotion you could think of. And so my lead on the game story was, are you not entertained? That was a gladiator sport.
I mean, the Broncos haven't had a primetime game of importance, really, since 2018. I mean, the last time they were on, say, Monday night, it was 2020, right? That was the last home game.
Tennessee Titans COVID year,
so the fans not in the stands.
Nobody really got
So, I mean, it's really been since 2018 since you've had a primetime game in which there was actual real importance there, and that was pretty exciting to see, and you're right.
What was the 2018 one? I'm trying to remember. Was it the Chiefs-Broncos one? Was that where Mahomes suddenly emerged?
That does sound because that was at the tail end of the season, but it's been a while, and for the Broncos to have this kind of game, obviously now they hit a bye week as late as you can get it,
hey,
and it obviously ends up being the perfect time for the Broncos now, who are going to be rested when they take on the Colts. And I do wonder a little bit. I was talking about that when I was watching the game last night, the idea that maybe the Broncos, with the last possible bye week, maybe the defense is a little bit worn down too. They haven't had a break. This has been part of it as well. But that they come together when they need to come together. They still get another 3 sacks. The league's leader in sacks, the Broncos, coming into that game, get 3 more. They get 3 interceptions, 2 of them returned for touchdowns, one by the Broncos' Nick Bonito, who has turned into a superstar in very, very short order. He had an opportunity to talk about, get his reaction after that from the Broncos' own social media account.
It was perfect because it's like everyone was calling that Casa Bonito, right? So it's like now you're setting up the inevitable connection here. Like, Casa Bonito, you need to do a partnership with.
We know the South Park guys are down. They've already, they're Broncos fans. They've come and they've done videos and filled the COVID year with cardboard South Park characters.
I actually went I went to Casa Bonito a few weeks ago for the first time. Interesting experience. You know, not top tier food, but fantastic. Like, it's a good experience. It's fun, things like that. But you know, I think
so. Cody's one of the cool kids. You can get an invite.
The rest of us I got grandfathered in. Somebody. You know, my fiance's cousin, her company had like a special invite. And
there you
so
go.
We got to go in. So yeah, it was pretty cool there. But no, the Broncos getting benefits from 2 Bo's. Nick Bonito, obviously, in terms of what he's able to do. I mean, and right now I think that we can clearly say right here, Nick Bonito's got a strong case, I think, to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. I mean, you look at it, he's half a sack away right now from the league lead at this point.
Yeah.
He had a pick 6. He and Von Miller are the only 2 players in Broncos franchise history to have 10-plus sacks in a season and a pick 6 in the same exact season there. Bonito was emerging. And I think right now, seeing him perform on the national platform that was Monday Night Football, you had a lot of people that don't watch Broncos games. They're like, wait, who's number 15? It's like, those people aren't like diehards because they're not paying attention to it. Bonito has had a hell of a year. He's in that conversation.
Sacks for Bonito, now only a half sack behind Trey Hendrickson of the Bengals, but out of the top 8 guys in sacks in the league. Hendrickson, Bonito, Danielle Hunter of Houston, Myles Garrett, of course, from Cleveland. We just saw Jonathan Greenard. That's a couple games against
2 really elite pass rushers.
Bulls that it's held up. Jonathan Greenard of Minnesota, Will McDonald of the Jets, TJ Watt, of course, and Will Anderson of Houston. Those are your top 8 guys in sacks. Bonito, half a sack behind the league leader, but he's the only one of those that has an interception, and he's the only one that has a touchdown. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. Now, to be fair, give it to Andrew Van Ginkel of Minnesota, who has 9 sacks on the year and 2 pick 6s on the year.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron Rodgers. I mean,
But what Bonito's doing is pretty remarkable, especially given the fact that he wasn't getting the snap count of a starter early in the season. The idea for a while was that Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper would sort of sort out the job because Bonito was under contract. Those 2 guys were free agents. But Cooper and Bonito made the choice to trade Browning. A bit of a no-brainer because, quite frankly, out of those 3 guys, as talented as Baron Browning really is, he hasn't produced at the level the other 2 had. But an opportunity after Bonito makes that game-changing pick 6 for the Denver Broncos, where things looked wobbly for a while there. Bonito jumps the route, does a beautiful job on it. Cornerbacks would be proud.
Zach Allen did a fantastic job pressuring,
and Bonito gets that. But here's his reaction after that pick 6.
Oh! And see, people didn't believe me when I told them I was a DB. They could tell by the video now. I had no celebration either. I was just too hyped and tired. Nah, that's dope, though. That's dope.
You want to know a little bit more about Nick Bonito as well. If you're walking around, you see above our head there that picture of Aaron Gordon there next to Bo Nix, the new magazine right now. Inside that, page 1, an interview with Nick Bonito. Nick Bonito talking about his love of anime and characters in anime, specifically the ones with speed. Got to see a little bit on display. Prescient vision there from our magazine.
Yeah, and obviously Nick's
the opposite of the curse.
Nick's going to go on a little bit of vacation. He told me he's going to go back home to Florida this week just to recoup, reset. He's a big fan, like Danny Bailey. I know you watched The Boys. Nick Bonito's a big The Boys fan. I kind of gave him the nickname Homelander there because he's on Demon Time. But Nick obviously just a tremendous season, and I think he and Jonathan Cooper together, it's fun to watch because there are certain things. You know, I was talking to both of them. They're sitting next to each other after, like, after the game, they're sitting there at their lockers. One of the things we saw, Jonathan Cooper's like, hey, I want to try to get Nick these sacks. Like, Cooper's a very selfless teammate. Like, he's very much about like,
and got to sack himself last night.
Man, and did he get home on Jameis Winston? Just a gritty performance by the Broncos defense. And that was one of the things that Jonathan Cooper talked about after the game. Look, Denver's defense, they run on the field for 84 plays, folks.
Yikes.
That is usually like 15 to 20 more snaps than usually like the league average. I think good offenses, you want them to be on, like an offensive coordinator say, I want us to be on the field for at least 72 plays. 84 is crazy for the defense there. And look, first half, 6 of 10 on third down, not good.
Right.
But they came out in that second half there and they buckled down a little bit. I think Cleveland ended up finishing, 9 of 19, 9 of 16, one or the other there, but they only converted 3 more third downs, which didn't really matter because they had some explosive plays.
It was even better than that. It was actually 9 of 19 when it was all said and done. Yeah.
So, but first down, second down, that was a little bit of a difference maker there for the Browns. It was a thriller. Cardiac kids. I haven't seen in my years being here on the beat. There's been a lot of instances where I've seen fans leave the game early. I've seen fans like the environment just be dead quiet.
I sat in the stands as fans left the game during an overtime.
Yeah, I was there. For that, watching fans exit in drubs there.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, like, everybody was in their seat. It was loud. They were stomping. It was Mile High electricity. It's back. It's back here in the Mile High City. That's fun. And Broncos fans should be very excited about that.
And it feels like a lot of that comes from, obviously, the understanding that you do have a quarterback. The quarterback situation is, at least for the next few years, solved. But you're talking about now you have your quarterback. You have a defense that is extraordinarily capable. You have a rising star in Benito. Obviously, you have an established star, the best corner in the game in Pat Surtain. Jerry Jeudy had a phenomenal game, and full marks to Jerry Jeudy, who I think when we talk about the things that he really did well and has always done well, he's been a very, very good route runner. Now, some things obviously with the Broncos didn't work out. Some of the understanding for Jeudy as he was a young player was not necessarily the ability to run the route, which is always good, but as you know, Cody, sometimes the challenges can be to make sure that you are open at the time you are expected to be open. And that was the biggest challenge with Jeudy and the Broncos. But I never was down on Jeudy's talent. It was pretty evident it wasn't going to work here in Denver for a bunch of reasons. But actually, you know what? I'm watching the broadcast at home. I'm laughing a little bit. I'm sort of happy for Jerry Jeudy. He's playing the heel. He's playing to the crowd. He's having fun with it, having a great game. You know what? From an entertainment standpoint, I enjoyed it. I thought, you know what? That's fair. I've never been one of those guys that has a problem with that. It's the old, you're playing basketball. You don't want to get on a poster? Cool. Don't get dunked on. Right.
Yeah.
And if Jerry Judy's going to go off like that, and then he gets his moment, he gets to go ahead and hear it from the crowd and do his, let him have it sort of thing. I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me. And I'm happy that he had a good performance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, it's a shame it never worked out that way here in Denver for Jerry. I still find it like after the game, he still did it after the fact. And obviously you came.
Yeah, a little weird after you get the loss. Right. You got the loss.
And so I think the message that it sends in the locker room is like, this guy just cares about just getting his, which, it's like you want to win.
And some of that was evident with the Broncos at times too, that the complaints that he wasn't getting the ball enough, even during the games in which they won. And maybe there's some maturity there that has to be there. But certainly we saw the talent on display.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I even came away with the takeaway. I was like, because obviously they traded Jerry before Bo was even on the team. I couldn't help thinking, I was like, you know what, in this offense, I think with Bo as the quarterback, Jerry Jeudy would ball.
Yeah.
In this offense.
But I think Sean Payton had already seen it.
You're up against the clock. It's like we don't want to pay him. Like we've tried everything we can. It just doesn't seem like it's going to fit. Our window with him is closing. I think that's where they were kind of at with that with Jerry. And so they traded him to Cleveland. And look, we're seeing other guys emerge. Devon Vele, once again, Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims coming up big, finally in a big time moment at receiver. But man, he's becoming a little bit of a special package here, and obviously something we'll highlight here as we continue on MHS today.
Yeah, it is. And why don't we turn our attention to Bo Nix? Obviously, when you look at this game, Nix was, I thought, played well enough. I don't look at this at some of the recent games and say, wow, Bo Nix had a really good game. I don't think he had a really good game, but I think that
he had a pretty good game.
He was able to keep his cool. He was able to keep from getting disrupted. He was getting pressured. They were throwing some interesting looks at him. You and I were talking about it before the program. A lot of really good disguised pressures from the Browns, a lot of innovative sort of schemes. We know that they like to play a lot of inverted defenses. As a matter of fact, the pass play to Mims on an inverted
Cover
coverage. So I think when that's another one of those things that maybe Nick's hadn't seen to that extent. And yes, there's always the threat that Myles Garrett is lurking around the corner and about a half second from burying you in the turf. And so I think for Knicks, you saw some of that in the early going. You saw him really want to go for the deep shots, a little bit of almost Russell Wilson-esque play in the early going, roll out, try to find something deep. It almost cost them on a couple of occasions, a couple of interceptable balls that weren't, but kept it together, kept the cool, and was able to find a way, especially late, in which he played really well. On third downs in particular, even though he only completed 51% of his passes on the night, in third downs, 7 for 11, so that's a 64%, 156 of his 294 yards for more than half,
Yep.
and his touchdown, all on third down. So had
Huge.
it, much like the Broncos defense, had it when it counted.
Yeah.
When it was winning time, found a way to make the right play at the right time.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's something you got to highlight about the offense is that third down has been an area they've improved drastically over the last handful of weeks. And really, it's been Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix on third down primarily that have been big. And obviously,
Devon Vele, not in this game so much, but in the previous handful.
Not necessarily this game on third down for Devon Vele, but for Marvin, that 93 yards on 3rd and 10. That was a pretty nice play right there. But really, like in our
especially
MHS,
if they're bad first two downs.
Yeah, the film review is already up from the Browns game. You're going to see Cortland and Bo connect several times on third down. They're keeping that connection going right there. It's very big here. It's a big part of the offense, but I know we're going to highlight Bo Nix and the Broncos offense a little bit more here.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot to unpack here. The running game is part of it as well. We'll get into some of that later in the game, in our game at least. This game, our show feels like game day for us. But for the Broncos, the hot hand running approach is interesting. We'll have to discuss that when we get to the idea of the bye and what they'll do next. But there's clearly confidence in Bo Nix. Coming into the game, only 2 quarterbacks drop back to pass more than Bo Nix. Now, maybe that's more than ideal at this stage in his development, but it's pretty evident that Sean Payton trusts Bo Nix and did since day one, because these dropbacks have been more or less consistent. They've peaked back up. It's kind of been a little U-shape, right? He started with a lot of those pass attempts in the first 2 games, losses for the Broncos, 4 interceptions for him in the first 2 games. Then they dropped a little bit as the Broncos sort of worked their way. They gave Nix a little bit less to chew on, and now they've gone back up over and over again. So in this case, more aggressive offense, more confidence in the wide receivers. I also want to look at the idea that Troy Franklin, there were only 2 targets there, almost got a touchdown on a kind of wide receiver screen. 5 targets for Franklin. Franklin and Nix are starting to come along. A couple of those misses were very narrow.
Scramble drill.
Yeah, but they are realizing the value of Marvin Mims' speed, which is extraordinary, and Troy Franklin's speed, which is not that much slower than Mims, but he's taller. And you're starting to see those things sync up in depth behind the top pairing of Sutton and Vele.
Yeah, and it begs the question, if Reynolds is going to come back, we're going to probably find out the decision on that today.
You can make the argument that Reynolds, in the time he was with the Broncos, was actually their most effective receiver when they were all healthy.
Look, if they're going to make the playoffs, which is trending that way, they're going to they're going to need him.
You'd better make it now.
You need as many weapons as you can here, especially if the run game has to get going. Like if the Broncos going to make the playoffs, you have to find a way to run the ball at some point here. Denver's run offense has not been good. Look, I got into a national spat last week. I pissed everybody on Twitter off that don't watch film, and they're like, "Oh, this guy doesn't know." Like, watch the games. Like, I don't think you can ask a single Broncos fan, "Hey, has the run game been good for the last handful of years?" They'd be like, "What run game?
Yeah, run game?
What run game?" The last 100-yard rusher the Broncos had, Jerry Rosburg was the interim head coach, and it was Latavius Murray running for, I think, 115 yards on 15-something carries.
It's the longest streak in the NFL active without
now 30 straight games.
Yeah, without a 100-yard rusher.
Like, you tell me that's a good run game. Like, and people are saying like Bo Nix is protected by a good run game. Like, you don't watch the Broncos if you actually think that. And like, that's the problem I have with national media. I pissed everybody off last week. I don't care. I was the villain for a day, but it's just, it's frustrating to see the national media narrative sometimes get painted about that. Look, some of these guys do watch film, but they don't watch the large volume, right? They look at their advanced analytics with their glasses on. And they're like, ooh, this guy's ADOTCPOEA, whatever the hell you want to call it. Is this, that, or the other? And it's like, just watch with your freaking eyes.
As one of those former national guys myself, I'll push back a little bit because you do have a whole league to cover, not a team.
And that's the thing.
And I will say this.
People pretend they watch all 32 teams. You don't. Nobody has
time
to watch all 32
You don't
teams.
have the time. That's true. And I think when you look at that from that national perspective, that's part of it. True. And especially, look, some of this is for the Broncos fans to look at the national broadcast and say, wow, they don't seem to, Jaquan McMillan's not having a bad year. I don't think Troy Aikman can beat Jameis Winston in a foot race right now, despite what he had said. No disrespect to Troy. But some of this is because you got to understand the Broncos themselves are sort of responsible for that, right? They haven't made the playoffs since 2015. It's the longest string of any team that ever won a Super Bowl to have to get back to the playoffs. They haven't had a winning season since 2016. One more win will get them there.
The Jets are ahead of them right now.
The Jets are actually much longer in playoff droughts, but no team has ever won the Super Bowl and gone as long without making the playoffs again as the Broncos are on their current streak. So you can imagine if you are if covering the league on a national standard, you're not going to pay attention. You're probably not going to watch a lot of Panthers film, right? You're not going to watch a lot of the Patriots or the Raiders
last night
unless you need to. And the Broncos have been in that world, and they've put themselves in that world for the majority of a decade, and that's on them. But you continue to perform well. You make your team interesting. You'll get the attention, and that'll get better.
Yeah, and look, I say probably for the first time last night, a lot of people tuned in to the Broncos. And look, it was an entertaining game, and certainly like there's so much to break down from it. It was everything you could have wanted, except like if you love defense, you would have hated that game. Look, I'm a defensive core. I used to be a defensive coordinator. I'm a defensive guy. I hated
nightmare
last night. I even said it's like burn the tape. Outside of a couple of films, burn the tape. Outside of a couple of plays, right there, it was stressful to say the least. I know as a defensive coaching staff, those guys are like, gosh. And Sean Payton, I'm sure after every big play, Sean Payton's looking over at Vance Joseph like, "What are you going to do?" Like, there were some interesting adjustments that they did make late in the game. We'll obviously highlight a little bit later on here on MHS today, but yeah, just I think a good performance here by Bo Nix, the Broncos offense, to deliver. Like when they were down 32-31, it was like, hey, what are they going to do in this situation? And they executed a really methodical drive. And at one point, it was like 4th and 3. And I was like, is Sean Payton going to go for it? Like, no, don't do it. Take the points.
Right. Take the points
here. Thought about it. They kicked the field goal and then they go up and it's like, hey, now the defense has to get a stop there. But it's like
they said on the broadcast, by the way, the analytics agreed with you.
Take the points.
Kick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
No, you're not a fan, but you all were on the same page, you and the math nerds.
Yeah, it's context. But I would say
the context is you were both on the same page and said they should kick. That's the context.
Well, yeah, you should kick there because you're going to get the lead.
So every once in a while, the math works out too.
Because if you don't get it, you lose the game.
You take the lead whenever you can take the lead in a football game. Of course.
I would say this, though, too, is that like that was a moment like in the past after the Browns would have scored, like let's say last year, after the Browns scored on that Nick Chubb touchdown, I feel like we'd have been like, all right, it's over. That's it.
Well, the offense was too discombobulated, right?
And we'd have been like, there's no way they're going to do it.
Yeah, let alone mount a legitimate drive, right? You're hoping for something lucky.
They did a good job.
Much better job than what we were talking a couple weeks ago.
I think they got it down to about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And then obviously the Browns, had their points there.
But you couldn't do much more than that. I mean, they did well. And for the 4th week in a row, I look at a Bo Nix throw, the 93-yard touchdown to Mims. This is the 4th week in a row where I look at the best throw of his career. 4 straight weeks.
Best throw of the year in the NFL right now. There's some good throws. That might be in the conversation.
Yeah. Now the concern. Let's look at some of the negatives of that too, because there were a couple times Nix rolled across to his right. Within their own 20, threw across his body to the middle of the field to Cortland Sutton. That ball could have easily been picked. It was the wrong choice. That's feeling your oats a little bit.
Hey. He's got the confidence, though, to do it. Like, I broke it down on the film, too.
Well, Jameis Winston has a lot of confidence, too.
Yeah.
You get what you get out of that.
Yeah. I think Bo's release, like, I think he knows where to put it in a situation like that, which is good. I broke it down on film because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, they got that linebacker drop back. Cortland's coming on the crosser. I'm like, okay, he's rolling out to his right, which I like that sprint design because now it's like, hey, by design, you can extend the play a little bit. You can allow your coverage to open up. They were against zone coverage. It was a cover 3. And then it's like, hey, you float that in a perfect spot. That corner has to protect the vertical route. And so he can't get over in time to try to make that play. And that linebacker is simply not tall enough or athletic enough to go up and get it. It's a calculated risk.
It is.
And it's like when it's like, oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be those choices. And obviously for Nix learning to make the right ones matters. The interception he threw was not a good throw. No, not a good choice, not a good throw.
I broke that one down on the film too. I don't like the play call too. And Sean told us after the game, he said, that's on me. But it's like you run a 2-man route concept there and you take a shot downfield. It's like the Browns defense already knows we already got burnt by Marvin Mims. Denzel Ward did a great job, played a textbook corner perfectly. He's like, I'm not letting Marvin get behind me. I'm keeping him in front of me. It's like, if that's Cortland Sutton running that, I might be, I'm like, all right, hey, throw that to your tall guy. But to Marvin, not necessarily the one there because they were protecting deep, and Denzel Ward just played at textbook coverage in terms of like, I'm going to stay over the top here, and then I'm just going to body position against a smaller receiver and then make the play. I didn't like it because it's like, run the clock down. Like that one right there, I was like, Sean, what are you doing? Like,
yeah,
run the clock down.
Well, and we've seen that a couple times, right? The idea that they could be doing a little bit more.
Yeah.
It strikes me. I remember watching Denzel Ward again, who's been, by the way, a
very good,
very, very, very good player. Do you remember back in that draft, 2018 draft, right, where he was picked directly in front of Bradley Chubb, letting the Broncos pick Bradley Chubb, and the Browns were savaged by that pick. Everyone was laughing at the Browns, saying, "What a crazy pick!" Well, all I know is that Denzel Ward's gone to 3 Pro Bowls and still looks like one of the better corners in the league, and he's still on the team that drafted him. Bradley Chubb isn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know what?
Denzel Ward's a pretty good
corner. But
corner.
it's, again, one of those things that you look at the draft and you just don't know. It's a lot of it's about fit. It's a lot about guess. Denzel Ward is the 4th pick in that draft, has been a great selection for them. One of the better picks in the first round, as a matter of fact.
He and Myles Garrett are the 2 corner pieces of that defense.
Yeah.
And they got talent. Like even Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, luckily he was on IR because he would have been a problem.
He's a problem.
He would have been a problem. He was on IR. I think he's eligible to come back after this week. I don't know if he will or will not, but man, even that, like that was a guy I wanted the Broncos to get, in the draft process was JOK. He's a piss missile. But the thing I would say this is that like that Browns defense, like they're gritty, they're tough. Like they did a lot of things where it's like they were going to blitz the nickel, they were going to blitz the outside corner, and they were going to play just cover 3 out of that. They were going to rotate the middle field safety to the 3rd where the corner was blitzing, and then they dropped the linebacker to the middle 3rd, and the other corner is just playing his deep 3rd there, and they were dropping defensive linemen back to the middle hook while blitzing linebackers. Like they were just trying to get a little too creative with it. I thought Bo made some really good decisions, minus the interception there. I didn't think that was a good one, but I love the aggressiveness.
Yeah, I think there's some aggressiveness here, and I think you're seeing with Knicks the concerns that you had going on of the game slowing down. Look, he's understanding it, and now he is taking calculated risk because it feels like it is no longer too fast for him.
Yeah, he knows what he can get away with. He knows what he can't do.
Right, and there are calculated gambles, and that's the way it goes.
Did you see that throw to Bailey
really
on that incredible play? That was just well-placed throw. I mean, once again, he's making throws. I'm like, wow, that's a damn good throw. The Broncos having that quarterback that can do some of these things.
Yeah, the arm strength nonsense, and we talk about this every time. I get it. You can have the Zach Wilsons of the world. He's on the Broncos, by the way, too. They can have a big arm and throw it whatever. But that's great. Jameis Winston's arm is ridiculous. That guy throws heaters when he could step into it that are as good as anybody in football. But the arm strength for Knicks has always been undervalued because it is good enough. Is it elite arm strength? No. But you know who also didn't have elite arm strength? Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Tom Brady.
Elite.
Yeah. Nobody ever talked about those guys having the biggest, strongest arms in the league.
It's
about getting it on time, on target, read the defenses. That's how you win. Bo Nix is that kind of player, and it seems to be coming along rather well. Want to remind you, by the way, that tomorrow, of course, is Wednesday. Wednesdays is our Wellness Wednesday because mental health is health, and you'll have an opportunity to get your checkup from the neck up from our friend Dr. Rick Perea. Think14u.org. Think1number4u.org is the website. The performance psychologist for the Broncos when they won Super Bowl 50, and the last time they went to the playoffs at all. Hopefully this year they end up breaking that, but also has worked with many NFL teams, many NFL Hall of Famers, but he can also help you, whether you're the parent of an athlete yourself, or maybe you just want a reframe of your position where you are and whatever it is you're doing. We can all benefit from a little bit of a checkup from the neck up and change the way that we look at things in our lives, be more effective, be more efficient, be better at focus. These are all things that you can just do yourself. You don't need medicine. You just need to work on it. And sometimes you just need a little bit of help. So that's where Dr. Rick Prey and his team can help. Make sure you check him out too. There's a website, think14u.org. And of course, Wellness Wednesdays right here, a program that he puts together with a lot of really interesting guests on Mile High Sports. Normally, of course, we'll borrow a little bit from the talk shows about it. When you say you got mossed, that generally means the receiver did something amazing. The Broncos got mossed last night because Riley Moss was not available, injured with that knee injury, missing the game. Levi Wallace basically had the opportunity to replace him. Let's just say after Jerry Jeudy caught 9 catches for 235 yards and a touchdown, and could have caught another 70-plus yard touchdown with relative ease if Winston would have hit him because he was wide open. It did not work. So Levi Wallace, I don't necessarily the backup is the backup for a reason. I don't expect him to look good, but the Broncos, the thought process was, given the fact that Elijah Moore has never really established himself as a particularly dangerous receiver yet. Definitely has talent, still some upside there. But the idea would be Surtain would travel and basically lock down Jeudy. Surtain against Jeudy, when he did travel and when he did go against him, he was really, really good. On 3 targets, 2 catches for 20 yards. Now, granted, you could argue catching 2 out of 3 isn't that good, but for 20 yards, he limited to 20. Against the rest of the team, 10 targets, 7 catches, 215, most of those against Wallace. I felt really bad for Levi Wallace in this game because this is a guy that it just felt like, to me, the speed was no longer there to be effective against Jerry Jeudy, but maybe I'm off on that. What did you see with the Jeudy and Winston exploited? Because for a big part of this game, that wasn't part of the offense. That was the offense.
Yeah, it was. When you look at the production, I mean, half of Jameis Winston's passing production, 75% of it went to Jerry Jeudy there. And look, it was for Levi Wallace, it's tough. Like, veteran cornerback's been in the league a long time. This was a game where it's like you want to forget it. You have to have a short memory. And look, early on, it's tough because, you see a lot of people saying, how come the Broncos didn't put Pat Surtain on Jerry Jeudy the entire game? It's hard. You can't. Like, maybe if Riley Moss was playing, right, you could, because then you can afford to go man-to-man coverage because you got a guy who can play man-to-man on a consistent level with Pat, with Jaquan McMillan, obviously with Riley Moss there. But because Moss is out of the lineup at this point, you can line up Pat on Jerry, but because Jerry is the one guy they motion more than anybody on that offense, if you're in zone, you can't necessarily stay with it. You have to check. You can't check into certain things. You can't rob Paul to pay Peter, because ideally, you can't just go man coverage the entire game. You have to find a way to get back and find those spots there. And early on, I think Jameis Winston, the Browns, they did a good job of exploiting the Broncos in zone coverage. They threw a couple of different tight looks out in terms of, multiple receivers, tight end sets there, multiple crossing patterns there. And it's like the Broncos linebackers and safeties are now in a position to have to choose. But then when you are in man-to-man situations, you got to capitalize there. And Levi Wallace, I think the first big play he gave up was to Elijah Moore in this game. Mm-hmm. He does a good job initially. He's playing press. He's jamming on the slant. And then all of a sudden his eyes go to peek inside at Jameis Winston, who turns it into a scramble drill. Elijah Moore flips it and turns it into a corner route on the scramble drill. And it's like, there's a busted coverage there. So now it's like, where's the balance as a corner between playing too aggressive and then also like, wait, I can't play too aggressive because we're getting caught.
And Elijah Moore had 8 catches for 111 yards. He was really good. And then it wasn't big in the yardage department, but David Njoku was a problem the whole game.
They have good weapons. And Njoku, we even talked about as well, their second leading receiver coming into the game. He's
2 touchdown catches, guy. Big body, and very athletic.
Yeah.
The second touchdown catch where Winston basically lobs it, and Njoku basically flings his body backwards to catch that ball essentially parallel to the ground. Yeah. Just an extraordinary performance by a big body tight end. I mean, he's got all the tools, and it's one of the reasons I think a lot of Broncos fans, myself included, Troy Rank as well on this program, really wanted the Broncos to go after him. But the Browns never put him on the block, even because they understand if they're going to get back to where they were last year, which was the playoffs. That's a guy they're going to need. Yeah, no, and it's tough. And so, like for Levi Wallace, you're also in the mindset too. We always talk about it. You have to have short-term memory. My freshman year of high school, I got burnt 3 times in one game for a touchdown, big touchdowns. And that was the worst feeling I've ever had in my entire life. Like, it made me sick to my stomach. And so it's like, you have a chance to, like, you can think about it and dwell on it. You can learn from it. From that point, I personally never gave up another touchdown in my career plan, which was nice. But it's like, you have to have the psychology, like, you can't let one negative play affect you. Right. And certainly with cornerbacks, the psychology of it, when you get got for a big play, now you start playing a little bit like on your heels a little bit. It's like, wait, do I bite on this? Mm-hmm. Do I play it tight? Like, it's a tough position to be in. But Jerry Jeudy went off, and congratulations to Jerry on that. But didn't have much success there against Pat Surtain, and it's tough. I know Broncos fans would have loved to see PS2 on Jerry the entire game. I'm telling you, from a conceptual standpoint, that's an impossible. Nobody does that. No. Well, no team ever really does.
With all the motion in today's game,
even when you're right,
almost impossible.
That's the trick, is because it's not the way it used to be, where you'd grab, say, Champ Bailey, and you go again. You'd like lock this guy down wherever he goes. You're going to shadow him. It doesn't work that way because of so much motion, so much pre-snap movement, so many 4 wide receiver sets. It becomes impossible to do.
It's like even your personnel, like, do we have the linebackers or safeties that can do these certain things that we're going to ask them to do if we do lock up and just go zero coverage or cover one? Like, it's you can't put your other defensive player, like, you have really great cover guys, but you can't put your other guys in a position where it's like, hey, we're asking them to do a little too much here.
Yeah, obviously a impressive performance from a yardage standpoint. But look, 3 interceptions for the Broncos. They find a way to and
3
not
sacks.
And not from all the corners. You had 2 linebackers, Benito and Barton. Barton, if he was just a little faster, he didn't have a chance. I did love, though, the aggressiveness because he had that window. He's like, I'm going.
He's like, yeah, he could.
I'm not taking a
I'm
touch
not sliding.
back.
I'm just
let's go. Let's see if we can finish this thing off. And he got caught by Jerry Jeudy, who ran him down as you'd expect for speed. But again, another really good performance by Cody Barton too. But late in the game, the Broncos in the fourth quarter decided that maybe they had seen enough with Wallace and decided to put rookie Chris Abrams-Drain out of Iowa
First
out there.
Regular season game for him.
Yes, and when you're talking about Abrams-Drain getting his performance, he was one of the guys that I think in the offseason, a lot of people thought as the mid to late draft picks, he was going to be one of the X Factor guys that might step in and even compete for a starting role or be a big part of the equation. He hadn't been. But the Broncos decided to go up, throw him out there. He did get an interference penalty. First game, obviously, you expect that to be difficult. But I thought that he performed well enough, and certainly better than Wallace, that I think we might see that going forward.
Yeah.
Abrams-Drain had an opportunity to speak to you after the game.
Yeah, and look, they're not afraid to play press with him. Like, I think that was the thing.
Yeah.
Like, again, with Levi Wallace, he's not much of a press guy, especially against speed. But like Chris Abrams-Drain, he's lengthy. He loves to play physical, loves to get hands on. That's one reason when the Broncos drafted him. He can excel in off ball coverage. He can excel in press coverage, and he's sticky.
And I apologize. I said Iowa.
Mizzou.
He's
Fellow
Mizzou.
grad.
Iowa's Riley Moss. Yes.
Iowa, Riley Moss, Mizzou, Chris Abrams-Drain. But, for him stepping up in a big moment like this was his first regular season game. I loved what we saw from him in the preseason. I thought he was one of their key standouts. But then it's like you look at Denver's depth. Okay, the emergence of Riley Moss. You got, Damari Mathis was injured, but he's worked his way into the dime package. Damari had a pretty solid game last night playing in the dime. Had a couple of pass breakups.
And of course, the find of the year last year with Jaquan McMillan.
Jaquan playing at an elite level. It's like, all right, it's hard to get this rookie on the field right now.
Yeah.
But with the way that Levi Wallace played, it's like at this point, you got to roll with Damari and Chris Abrams-Drain at this point because, they're younger. You're getting some work from them. They're playing special teams. It's a tough decision, but also the Broncos have to make a decision here on Josh Reynolds today. So it's like, I think that game, it's like you look at it. I think if we're projecting, here, it hasn't happened as the time we're sitting down and talking about this, but maybe the Broncos release Levi Wallace today. He'll go through waivers. They'll try to bring him back on the practice squad, which I think after Monday Night Football, they'll have no problem.
I think they could do that.
And then now you bring up Josh Reynolds, who you're going to need on the offensive side.
But that means they'll need more of Chris Abrams-Drain. And here's what he had to say to Cody after the game.
Big moment like that, obviously in the fourth quarter, have your name called up there. What was that moment like for you, especially in a cross-country situation?
Whatever I could do to help this team win, to be honest. Like, it ain't no time to be scared when you get through out there, so I was ready. What coach?
Well, obviously we talk about the final 4 games of the Broncos after the bye. Look who they get. Anthony Richardson, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes.
Maybe Mahomes after that. We'll see.
Maybe. But you have to assume that's who you're going to be facing. That is not easy.
3 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yes, and a guy that much like I think Jameis Winston and Anthony Richardson brings this sort of wild card energy that can take any game and just take a little snow globe and shake it into something else. Because Jameis Winston, you look at Winston's numbers last night, crazy counting stats, but 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And it's a bit of, I think Nuggets fans look at that and go, I remember that. That's J.R. Smith. All of a sudden you can go out there and win you a game where he can shoot you right out of a game.
I remember that.
But that's kind of how Jameis Winston plays. And he'll go out there and steal you games you have no business winning. And he'll also cough them up. But Richardson seems to be in the early stages of his career, that kind of guy too, where all of a sudden you should be able to beat them, but he's doing something amazing, pulls the rabbit out of the hat. And then of course we know about Herbert, Burrow, and Mahomes. You're talking about 3 of the best of the best.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I felt like after watching last night's game, I was saying it, while we were waiting to get into the locker room, I was talking to Andrew Mason. I was like, I look at this Colts matchup now. It's like, all right, this is going to be a tough matchup for Denver because Anthony Richardson, since being benched, he's been playing better. Look, he still throws the ball into some tight traffic areas, but man, he's got a mega arm. And if you get burnt in coverage, he can capitalize on it. But not only that, he's more of a threat with his legs now with how they're using him, especially in short yardage situations. They're doing QB designs.
Well, he's got that Jalen Hurts. He's a bigger body. He's a bully. He's a bully. He'll go right after you.
So, and they got good wide receivers too. I mean, they got a good tailback. You got Jonathan Taylor. You got Michael Pittman. You got, Downs at wide receiver. I know they got Mo Alley Cox, who's a pretty good tight end. I know they're not getting the production they've wanted out of the tight end position this year in Indy, but it's going to be a tough matchup, and they're on their bye as well, like
Yep.
with Denver at the same exact time. So that's going to be a tough matchup here. And obviously for the Broncos, if they control their destiny, a win against the Colts in week 15 would be big, and they would need the Miami Dolphins to lose a game. And at that point, the Broncos would be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where we are. I mean, look at that. We look at where the Broncos are in playoff position. Cody had exactly right. You beat the Colts after the bye, and then you'll just need one win of the next 3. Anybody? Now, granted, that's not easy. And Miami to lose any of their last 4 games, because if you knock off the Colts, you kick them back and you have the tiebreaker, and Denver clinches. So, I mean, yeah, they really actually do more. It's not entirely in their control. Miami obviously has some say in that. But when you talk about how thick and deep this AFC race has been, it's really starting to kind of thin out, and the Broncos find themselves in a really good spot where you have the opportunity to kind of take control of your destiny. The bye week oddly hits at the perfect time for the Broncos. They can look at the things that they've done all year, another opportunity for Bo Nix to get basically a breath. Look at what he's done well, look at what he still needs to improve upon, and he obviously strikes you as the kind of player that when he sees what he needs to improve on, he doesn't make a lot of those same mistakes twice. So yeah, this Colts game is enormous, and for the Broncos to have to go on the road and win that game, it's not a gimme. None of these last 4 are gimmies. Are they in a good spot? Yeah, they certainly are. But this is kind of for the Broncos rebuild that is going faster than it looks, and we're all going to eat crow if they win about 2 more games, because everybody at the station, except for Cody, when Cody said the Broncos would win 10, basically kind of went like, yeah, sure, man. But yeah, you're looking real good about that.
Hoping. I've been waiting to pull that clip back out.
All right.
I'm trying to.
I'll just bring it up. I thought they would max out at 6, and you were saying 10 as we're sitting on the sideline of the practice field out at Dove Valley, and you saw some things that we didn't. But the AFC playoff race has now started to really thin out with the Bengals losing. That made a difference with the Dolphins and their loss. That makes a difference. Now, obviously, it would have been infinitely better for the Broncos if the Colts and Chargers would have lost and both teams had their chance, but it's still got a lot clearer. The path is clear for the Broncos. And now, of course, with 8 wins, even though they don't have the tiebreaker, there's the only teams that actually have more wins than they do in the AFC. Obviously, when you're talking about it, are the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Steelers.
Yeah, and look, it's very, very interesting right now. You look at the Miami Dolphins' remaining games here. They're going to play this weekend against the Jets. And obviously, we know the Jets are the Jets, an abysmal franchise. They should play in New Mexico or something like that.
It's easier access to ayahuasca there.
Yeah, at the Houston Texans, which, man, Houston this year has been so up and down. They have not been this. They were not the team that they were.
But that doesn't matter to Denver because somebody's got to win the AFC.
San Francisco,
South, right?
They got played San Francisco 49ers in San Fran.
Disaster.
But the 49ers are a disaster this year. And then at the Cleveland Browns in the cold December 29th, that one is going to have some big implications.
Well, and same thing, you get the Jameis Winston oddball energy. I mean, you look at it, they're 2-3 under Winston, but the 2 they won are the Steelers and the Ravens.
Yeah, and then they close out the season at the New York Jets. But
hopefully
the Broncos will be in a playoff spot by then. I think, you mentioned as well, let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. At the Dallas Cowboys this weekend, at the Tennessee Titans, which, I mean, Tennessee, for some reason, they've kind of been playing some teams tough as of late. Versus the Cleveland Browns, versus the Broncos, at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So even for the Bengals, it is a tough schedule for them. I think one more loss.
Well, the Bengals have no loss.
If they lose this week,
they have no room to move.
They got to run the table.
One more loss for the Bengals, and that's it. They have to win out.
Next.
And when you look at the AFC, and when you look at, I think, the most consistent stat, we're not going to get too deep into the analytics here. It's a regular one, but you want to look at the safe bet in football, and quite frankly, in a lot of sports, point differential, right? When it ends up, because in the NFL, you're not running up scores. It's a 1-score type of league. There are 7 teams with a positive point differential in the AFC. Those are the 7 teams, if the playoffs started, would be today. The Bengals are the next closest. They are only -5 on the season, but they've lost 3 in a row. They went from being 4-5 and being in the thick of it to now being 4-8. 1 loss will do it. And that's where it could get good for the Broncos. You can't count on it that way. But look, if the Bengals were to lose a game and be eliminated, we know about the injuries Joe Burrow's absorbed. Would it be so crazy for the Bengals to pack it in and say, you know what, we're not going to risk our franchise guy, a guy that when he is healthy is right there with Mahomes and Allen and Jackson as the very best quarterback in the game. We're going to sit him and make sure he doesn't get hurt. I think that would make sense for Cincinnati. It is possible the Broncos dodge both Burrow and Mahomes. Although, obviously, if the Bills keep winning, the Chiefs have to keep winning because they don't hold the tiebreaker over Buffalo. But for the Broncos, that would just be luck. You have to assume you're going to run that gauntlet, right? You're going to have to run that one way or another with those teams. And the Colts, I get it. The least dangerous
for
of the
Denver
one
against the Colts,
but it's on the road.
Because think about it this way: like it is a must-win in that situation because the Colts, after that, they Titans, Giants, Jaguars.
Yeah, and they'd be only one game behind you and hold your tiebreaker.
So you need to
have to have it.
Week 15 is a must-win here for the Broncos, and it's going to be huge. And look, you're going to have. You don't want to rely on help, right? You just want to take care of business.
Right.
That's something that they couldn't do last year. But we've seen that this team is a little bit different. They're a little bit more resilient. So I think that's going to be a big thing we're going to watch here is like, you don't want to have to watch other people's schedule and say, okay, I hope it falls this way. It's no, take care of business. And obviously that's going to come up December 15th, 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time on CBS.
Yes, that will be that's obviously a big, it's great to be talking about these games in mid-December that matter, right? That have all these actual implications for the Denver Broncos and specifically have it under their control. When we talk about the bye week, what do they need to work on? I look at the running game and figure there needs to be something. I get that they went with the hot hand. Jaleel McLaughlin was great. I think we also understand giving Jaleel McLaughlin 20 carries a game is a terrible idea and it won't work. So you have to use a mix and match. Yeah. But you have Javonte Williams. You had two guys, Javonte Williams and Michael Burton, who finished with a stat line of 1 yard and 1 touchdown. Now, Burton's the fullback. That's cool. Javonte Williams had 4 carries to get 1 yard. Now he got the touchdown. Great. You get 2 rushing touchdowns. That's good. But wildly inefficient. They tried 1 carry with Mims to keep it, keep them honest. That's fine.
The Broncos' run game is good. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, it's not. But on Audric Estime again, what's the holdup? What is keeping Sean Payton from giving him a try? Because the one thing that he generally does not do is lose yards. Now, does he get stopped in line scrimmage? Sometimes he does, but he's not a guy that generally loses yards, and he does know how to kind of, quite frankly, it's a skill in the NFL with the running back. He knows how to fall forward. Yeah. And I'm curious to see what it is. Is it just blitz pickup? Because in this case, he only gave Williams 4 carries because he was ineffective too, but Estime only 3.
Yeah, I mean, the run game overall, really outside of Jaleel in the second half was
right. And it should be noted that, that only clicked in the second half.
Yeah, the first half, third quarter, late third quarter, fourth quarter, you start to see Jaleel start to spark. And look, Jaleel turned nothing into something. There was one
couple different runs.
He pumped the brakes like the road runner, ran to the other side. It's like, all right, Jaleel is cooking right now.
But that's not really a plan, right? The plan shouldn't be let our undersized running back just create and hope that he can, basically.
They got to find a way to produce. They got to find a way to produce. And I'll say this, like, for what Javonte lacks running the ball effectively this year, you certainly understand when you watch him, great in pass protection.
Outstanding.
I thought Jaleel McLaughlin was actually pretty solid in pass protection last night. You're going to see it on the film review up on Mile High Sports YouTube page.
He can't do as much with the size, but he can chip, he can get in front of a guy.
Audric Estime, big guy, doing well in pass protection right now. But it's just like, how do you do it? How do you get the run?
It feels like you need to have, and this is what I struggle with. It feels, Cody, like what they need to do. And obviously, Sean Payton's forgotten more about coaching than I know, but it feels like you need to walk in like you do with everything else in a game with a plan. And the plan will be, look, we're going to, whatever, in this game, like we look at their front and we're going to go more speed to the outside. We're going to go more McLaughlin. We're going to try Mims because we think we can exploit that. Or you come into a game and say, you know what? We think we're going to play some smash mouth football. We're going to get our guys going forward. We're going to go with a big back. But it feels like the Broncos never have a plan. I think the one beef I have with Sean Payton this year, and it has been minimal because he has really done an extraordinary job, much better than I expected, and I give him full marks for that, is that it still feels like Sean Payton treats the run game as something he's like the kid that has broccoli on his plate, right?
It's like
your parents are going to make you eat it.
Damn ball.
Yeah, he's going to make you eat it, but he doesn't want to. And I still get the impression that every time Sean Payton runs the ball, he's kind of rolling his eyes like, fine. And I think the Broncos need to have a little bit more of an identity about that because it will help Bo Nix.
He wants to run the football. I think the issue is they haven't had a lot of success. And when you look at the Broncos offensive line, they've been good this year, not necessarily in terms of run blocking, in terms of pass protection.
They've been near the top of the
They've
league.
done fantastic.
But run, they're middling.
And a lot of it is, it's a zone blocking scheme. And I think that's probably a big issue. Like, we're not seeing Quinn Miners pull to the next level, Ben Powers pull, Luke Wattenberg pull from the center spot. Like, we're not seeing a lot of pulls inside this offense, which, do get to that at some point? Like, what is the reason behind the lack of success? Because I mean, I was watching as well. There was a what was it? 2nd and 2. They run the ball. They go backwards 1 yard, and now you got a 3rd and 3. They can't even get the small yardage conversions in the run game. That to me is a little frustrating. Can't get it up the middle. Like I don't understand why it's struggling so much. Is it because teams are selling out against you? Maybe, but at this point, it's like if you're going to get to the postseason, you have to find a way to.
Well, and you have to do it sooner than that, because if you can't put it on video for other teams to look at and force them to actually consider it as a threat, then you're in trouble. And I don't get the impression. I think part of the reason that Julian McLaughlin was able to have the success he had is that Cleveland basically thought the Broncos will not beat us on the ground.
Yeah.
We're not worried about the Broncos beating us on the ground. So that's all right. They can have their smaller running back get yards here and there, but they won't win the game that way. And I think the Browns knew it and were able to sag off. It reminded me a little bit of the strategy back in Super Bowl 48, where, the Seahawks were fully happy with allowing Noshawn Moreno to carry the ball. At one point, Pete Carroll was even caught on video saying they're not going to beat us that way. Wasn't worried about it. And I think we even saw that with the Browns. The 3-win Browns were looking at the Broncos going, they can't beat us on the ground. We're not really concerned about it. Just make sure we don't get beat over the top. And that will be a concern when you really want to get into these last 4 games and make a playoff run. If teams don't respect your ability to run the ball, you have a problem.
You have to evolve, and hopefully coming out of the bye week, there's a better plan and there's something in place to get the run game going, because I've been saying it all year, and that's why I threw I got into the spat I did last week. It's like, I don't know how many times every week we've been like, if the Broncos can get the run game going, okay, the offense is going to – we've been saying that since week freaking 1 at this point. We've been saying that for the last 2 years. So you have a quarterback who can run, but people are like, how come they're not designing runs for – you don't want Bo to take
You want him to get those kind of hits?
No, you want it to be calculated. You want it to, if you're going to pull that card out of the deck, you want it to be in a moment where it's haven't seen that in a while. It came in a big moment. I think that's just something that Sean's doing. And you don't want to run your quarterback into the ground.
I agree.
He's not big like Jalen Hurts.
No, and he's not really truly a running quarterback. He's opportunistic, and people look at it like, he could run it. Yeah, he can run. But if you want to sustain in the NFL, you need to make sure you minimize hits, period. And so exposing Knicks to that's not the answer. Look, this isn't a team built around a special athlete like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels. That's not really how this works, and it's not how a Sean Payton offense is ever going to work. But yeah, you look at the Broncos in the running game, and they're just barely out of the bottom third of the whole league. I mean, it's not been good, and it's not been good in yards per carry. It's not been good in totals. It's not been good in touchdowns. I mean, you name it, and you're right. That has to find a way to get better. I find it interesting, though, that the way it gets run, because we know that Javonte Williams is at the end of his contract. He'll be a free agent after the year. I don't suspect the Broncos will sign him. That has less to do with Javonte Williams and more to do with just the value of the running back position. If Saquon Barkley's of the world don't get second contracts or third contracts at time, Javonte Williams isn't going to get one. So if you know that Estime and McLaughlin are here for the longer term, why not invest in that? Especially since Javonte Williams right now, for whatever reason, is not doing anything particularly special. I mean, I'm okay with the idea. We talked about Chris Abrams-Drain and maybe moving on from Levi Wallace, because, look, it's great to be in this run. And the Broncos not only could make the playoffs, they probably should make the playoffs at this point. But I don't think we look at it and say, anybody sane says they're a Super Bowl contender.
No.
You're still building. No. And so I look at someone moving away from a Wallace and playing an Abrams-Drain. Well, you've got to do that. You're still building. Maybe you'll move away from a Javonte Williams if you feel that McLaughlin and Estime are good enough in pass pro, because you don't want to get Bo Nix hurt. Maybe you look at Blake Watson. Maybe you find a way to start building with the guys you know you're going to have. And more than anything, I think in the bye week, all I really want to see is a commitment to the run and understanding and identity, a plan for the Denver Broncos to commit to the run, because at this point, it's great that they're having the year they have. It's great that Bo Nix is having the year he has. Bo Nix should probably never be in the top 3 in the NFL in dropbacks. And he definitely shouldn't be as a rookie.
And it's really because the lack of a run game. That's really the reason why. I would say.
So that's the fix.
Tyler Baday's been on the side for the last month, and he's making good progress. I think I would rather see him in.
That's fine too.
Or you get a guy like Blake Watson. I think the benefit you have with Watson right now is that you can elevate him 3 times from the practice squad.
And you're right, because we've seen Bidet of success.
But then you'd have to make a roster move to bring Bidet back, which Denver, I think right now they're not in a position to do that. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, you have to find a way to get a spark in the run game, and that's certainly been problematic. At this point, I understand the value that Javonte brings in pass protection. But at this point, is somebody I don't know who put the tweet out there last night. I think it was Nick Cosmiter. He said thunder, Estime in parentheses, lightning, McLaughlin.
Right.
Maybe get a little bit of thunder lightning approach here and see what you can do. Something's got to give at this point. But nobody's saying the Broncos are Super Bowl contenders. The fact that they're doing what they're doing right now is impressive. They've exceeded expectations that have been set from them in the offseason. And it's just fun. Enjoy the ride right now. They got to build into something special. And I think they're in the process of doing that. Certainly they have a quarterback that they feel confident is the guy. I think as more and more weeks go by, I think we've seen as a rookie, Bo Nix is their guy. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the key for this Broncos offense, unlocking sustainability, is finding a way to run the football effectively. They're not there yet. And if they can get that going, I'm excited to see how things open up for them. Yeah,
especially because when you look on that right side of the line, Mike McGlinchey is actually regarded around the league as a really good power run blocker. And pass
really good game last night.
Right. And pass blocking has been generally what's considered the weakest part of his game. We know that Quinn Miners is basically an all-around, Pro Bowl caliber guy, but you want that guy moving as well. We see how quickly he gets downfield and finishes off blocks. It is a little odd that the Broncos have been able to get something done consistently, and we'll find that out. But the bye week hits for the Broncos. They find themselves in a very, very good place. Pat Surtain had an opportunity to talk about what the Broncos might be looking at as well.
I just think working on little things, especially in the back end, just communication, honing in on our technique. I just felt like some plays we really missed the mark, or we miss execution. So I think the big thing is for us is to really hone in on technique, communication, and stuff like that, because we can't let that happen again.
Obviously, the breakdowns of the defensive backfield problematic, but it also feels to a certain extent as if you pointed at the beginning of the show, it was a bit of a one-off.
Yeah, it's a one-off. It's not who this Broncos defense is, and certainly it's not the standard. Like, talking to the guys in the locker room, they're like, that's not how we play. That's not us. Like, we don't – they were very unhappy. They wanted to go back out there and maybe have, like, a redo. But and the question is, like, they ask themselves this all the time. Like, they say Coach Payton always tells us, like, if we played this game again, what would we do differently? And I think that the mindset is we've got to find a way to adjust. Some of it's communication. Some of it is there's a clear – talent differential, in comparison, Levi Wallace to Riley Moss is drastically different.
Yeah.
Riley Moss is fast, very fast, can play press coverage, can do everything. You can't play man-to-man. That's not Levi Wallace's strength. Mm-hmm. And so you're hoping that the Broncos pressure could get home a little bit early on Jameis Winston. It certainly wasn't there early on.
It took them a while to get pressure.
But hats off to the Browns offensive line. They did a really good job. Their communication in terms of the various stunts Denver threw at them, they were in alignment. The Broncos offensive line also did a great job.
And the Browns situation is weird, because I think when you have to look at this game, you almost have to look at the whole game as a one-off, because tough team, bad record. You're talking about a situation with quarterback that really we've never kind of seen before. It was been very strange. It kind of polluted the environment there. But you have a coach, Kevin Stefanski, who's been there for 5 years. But prior to him being hired, the Browns had 12 straight losing seasons. They went to the playoffs last year. Stefanski's been NFL Coach of the Year twice in 5 years in Cleveland. Cleveland isn't actually that far off. They need to figure out the quarterback position, and it's definitely not Deshaun Watson, and it's probably not Jameis Winston, and they'll have to figure that out. But it is a team with a lot of talent, and it is a team that has the ability to kind of mess up a bunch of games. Witness the Steelers game, witness the Ravens game, in which the Browns win those both. So it feels like a bit of a one-off, but the one thing I think that they have to watch for, and you maybe don't have to worry about it against the Colts, because Anthony Richardson, I don't think, reads it that way, but Justin Herbert sure does, Joe Burrow sure does, Patrick Mahomes sure does. It felt like, especially during zone, and you played defensive back and coached defensively, the handoffs between the levels that Pat Surtain was talking about, the communication there, those were problematic, and Jerry Jeudy exploited those all night long. At times, when the levels concepts, the dagger concepts that they ran, the Broncos, when they moved from kind of the second level of the defense to the third level of the defense, guys got lost, not just Jeudy, but Elijah Moore as well, and Njoku, and they got lost all night. I think what Surtain's referring to is that, and that communication, that doesn't just land on Levi Wallace.
No,
you can say Wallace had a bad day against Jeudy because he's a bad matchup, and that's true. But Moore went for 100 plus, and Njoku had 2 touchdowns. The communication, especially in zone with the handoffs, were problems.
Yeah, and look, I think another thing too with that, it's also about identifying like, hey, if we're in man coverage here, like, you know, Denver will play match, they'll play some zone match, they'll play man match, they'll do a lot of different things. But the thing is like, okay, hey, if the linebackers are dropping back to play that hook, they've got to be able to get their eyes and locate, right? Or that's where like communication from the corner of the safety giving an in call is so crucial, so paramount. And obviously it's like when you have a cornerback that's on the outside, and let's say the number one receiver runs vertical. Well, you're not really going to be able to get that communication. So that's going to come from the safety and the nickel at that point. If the nickel's not to the side, it's coming from the safety. Coming from the linebacker. And I think the Browns offensively from a formation standpoint, they had different route patterns and they also had different choices. Like they'd go 2 back sometimes with Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb. And it's like, hey, a safety is going to
both of them can catch.
A safety is going to have to play man on him on one of these situations, or you may have to pass off the nickel. Are you trying to blitz? Like Brandon Jones on one play blitzed, and then Jaquan McMillan picked up a tailback out of the backfield. It's just about making sure that, hey, if we're doing this, we have to just be in alignment. And a lot of it also is reacting as the play's developing too. It's tough. Like it's so fast moving. There's so many moving pieces. Communication is definitely going to be a big thing that they're going to work on. Like during the bye week, take this week off. You're going to reset. They're back at practice next week. And that's going to be a big focus.
Yeah, you heard from Pat Surtain there about the communications issues. You can follow him on Instagram, by the way, at Pat Surtain2, the 2 being the capital I's, of course, in Pat Surtain. So Pat Surtain2, no spaces. Give him a follow. Some interesting stuff
pretty
there.
Good football player.
Pretty good football player. Pretty interesting IG account, too. Something might be coming up tomorrow. Just saying something to think about. For if y'all haven't followed PS2 on Instagram, you might want to. You got a little bit of time. The Broncos hit the bye week. They hit it at an 8-5 clip. One more win will give them their first winning season since 2016. They have matched their win total from last year and stand in a position where they are now more than likely. The base playoff odds put the Broncos at about 72% to make the playoffs. But the most important part of it is basically under their control. As long as they go beat the Colts, win one more game, and don't have Miami run the table, the Broncos will make the playoffs. And obviously in a league where it's been a one-score league all year long, if the Broncos can take care of business, they're in a very, very good spot. Very few people thought they would be in this spot. I know I didn't, but this man did right here. Cody Rourke suggested the 10-win season, and the Broncos making the playoffs so far, looking like Nostradamus over here. So you want to give Cody a follow. Obviously, follow everything he's doing over at Mile High Sports. Check out the Locked On Broncos podcast, of course, and the Film Room, which is up right now. A very, very good half hour of your time spent if you really want to know what's going on with the Denver Broncos from the guy who told you what was happening all along and nailed it. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Of course, the Broncos hit their bye week and they hit it as winners. Enjoy the win, Broncos fans. Now a final stretch of really exciting, really important football games. Been a while since you can go into mid-December as a Broncos fan and say, hey, guess what? These games matter. It will be fun. Danny Bailey is the man in the booth that makes everything work. He's Cody Rourke. I'm Sean Drotar. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Thanks for paying attention to us. However you managed to consume the show, we appreciate it. Click subscribe. You know the drill. And if you missed any part of it, grab that little red bar. Just slide it back. Easy peasy. We'll catch you tomorrow right here. Live, local, independent, your best home for Denver. This is Mile High Sports.